There is a version of you that exists only in your own head. A version that has already had the argument, already lost the job, already said the wrong thing at the wrong moment in front of exactly the wrong people. And that version of you has been living rent-free in your mind for so long now that you have started to forget there is any other version, any version that simply exists in the present moment without the constant background noise of a brain that refuses, absolutely refuses to stop running the same footage on loop. Most people call it overthinking, which is an almost embarrassingly gentle word for what it actually feels like from the inside, because from the inside it does not feel like thinking too much. It feels like being trapped in a building where every room you walk into plays a different recording of something you regret, something you fear, something you are not yet sure you have permanently ruined. And no matter how many doors you open trying to find the exit, there are only more rooms, more recordings, more versions of events that have not happened yet, but which your brain has decided to treat with the same urgency and vividness as things that are actively happening right now. The reason this matters, the reason this is worth sitting with for a moment, is that the thing overthinking steals most reliably and most completely is not your productivity or your sleep or your confidence, although it takes those too, but specifically and precisely your joy. The small, ordinary joy of being a person in a moment. The kind of joy that has no grand justification and needs none. The kind that exists in a cup of coffee or a conversation or the particular quality of afternoon light coming through a window. All of which become completely inaccessible when your brain is busy treating the present moment as a loading screen for the next thing it needs to analyze. Neuroscientists have a name for the brain network responsible for this. They call it the default mode network, which activates specifically when you are not focused on an external task, which means it activates precisely in the moments that should be available for rest or presence or pleasure. And what it does in those moments in people who have learned the habit of overthinking is generate an unending stream of self-referential thought, the relentless internal interrogation of what something says about you, what it means, whether it was the right choice, whether anyone noticed, whether they judged you for it, whether you should be doing something different right now with your life. What this means in practical terms is that your brain becomes particularly vulnerable to overthinking during the very moments when you should be recovering from it. The quiet evening at home, the brief pause between work tasks, the morning minutes before you fully engage with the day. Because these are exactly the circumstances in which the default mode network is most likely to activate. And once it does, the self-referential loop begins without any external trigger required, the brain essentially generating its own work, its own problems, its own crises to manage and ruminate about, as though idleness itself were an emergency that needed addressing. The cruelest part of the whole mechanism, and I say this as someone who has spent a significant portion of their life inside this particular trap, is that it genuinely feels like problem solving. Your brain is absolutely convinced that if it just keeps examining the situation from enough angles, if it replays the conversation one more time or imagines the future disaster in enough detail, it will eventually arrive at some kind of safety, some kind of certainty. And the neural circuits firing while you ruminate overlap so significantly with the circuits that fire during actual productive thinking that your brain literally cannot distinguish between working through a real problem and spinning in an elaborate loop that leads nowhere except to more exhaustion. You have probably experienced this in its most recognizable form during a social situation. You go somewhere, you talk to someone, something small happens, maybe a slight pause before they responded or a look you weren't entirely sure how to interpret, and by the time you get home, that small thing has become the entire evening, has eclipsed every other part of the experience, every laugh and every moment of genuine connection. Because your brain has decided that the ambiguous moment is a threat that requires immediate and sustained investigation. And so the joy that was available to you, that was genuinely available and right there, gets consumed entirely by a process that produces no useful output whatsoever. What makes this a particularly difficult habit to interrupt is that overthinking presents itself as a form of caring, as conscientiousness, as the responsible behavior of someone who takes things seriously. And so there is a strange guilt that comes with trying to stop it, as though letting the thought go is the same as being careless, as though presence and attention are the same thing, which they are not. Attention pointed obsessively at a reconstructed past or an imagined future is the precise opposite of presence. And presence is the only place where any actual experience of being alive is available to you. The research on breaking the cycle is less dramatic than you might hope, which is perhaps itself a useful piece of information. There is no single revelation that dismantles the pattern, but there is consistent evidence that small, deliberate interruptions accumulate into something significant over time. That learning to notice the moment the loop begins and redirect attention towards something physical and immediate, the texture of what you are touching, the sounds actually present in the room, the weight of your own body in a chair genuinely shortens the grip that rumination has, not because the thought is solved, but because the brain can be trained, slowly and with repetition, to stop treating every unresolved uncertainty as an emergency. This is not about forcing positivity or denying the legitimate concerns that your mind is attempting to process, but rather about creating enough space between the impulse to ruminate and the automatic reaction to it that other possibilities can emerge. There is something that stays with me from the neuroscience of all this, which is the finding that overthinking is not a personality trait, not something you were born with or something that is simply the shape of how your particular mind works. It is a learned strategy, a habit the brain adopted at some point because it seemed, in some context, like it might produce safety, and habits that are learned can be unlearned, which is not a comfortable or quick process, but is a real one. And the fact that 74% of people who received structured support for this pattern recovered from it is not a trivial statistic, even if it lacks the poetry of a more elegant solution. The present moment is always going to be the only place where your actual life is happening, not the version your brain is busy constructing from fragments of the past or projections of the future, but the one that contains your body, your senses, the people around you, and whatever small and unremarkable thing is directly in front of you right now, which may not seem like enough, which may seem far less compelling than the elaborate internal dramas your mind is capable of generating, but which is, in fact, the only thing that was ever going to be capable of making you feel genuinely alive rather than merely very busy inside your own head.